Quartiles are numbers that separate data into 4 equal groups, quarters. They don't have to be actual data values from the data set. They're just numbers that create a division in the data set. To find the quartiles, we'll start by arranging our data in order from smallest to largest values. Then we'll count from the outside in to find the center. That is Q2, our second quartile, also known as the median. In this case, our data set has 14 values, which means we have an even number of data values. There's not a single value that lives in the middle of this data set, so we have to average the 2 center values, the 7th term, 6.8, and the 8th value, 7.2. We're going to average those. Add the 2 data values together, cut it in half to find the average, which is 7. Q2 for this data set is equal to 7, or the median for this data set is equal to 7. What that tells us is that half of the data is below 7, or less than 7, and half of the data is larger than 7. Another way to look at that is 50% of the data is in the bottom, below 7, and we have the top 50%, which is above 7. Now we can find the first quartile, Q1. Looking at the lower 50% of data, the values 1 through 6.8, we're going to again find the center of that group of numbers. Here we're looking at 7 data values, which is an odd number, so there is a true center. The data value 2 is marking the middle of those 7 lower data values, so that is our Q1, our first quartile. The first quartile separates the lower 25% from the top 75% of the data. We'll repeat that same process to find the third quartile, looking at the top half of the data, the top 7 values in our data set. We'll count to find the center. And again, it's an odd number, so we're able to find a data value that marks the third quartile. The third quartile separates the top 25% of our data from the bottom 75% of our data. Quartiles allow us to talk about the location of our data using the quartiles for reference. We can refer to the bottom 25%, the top 25%, the bottom 50%, the top 50%. We can even refer to the middle 50%, which would be between the first and the third quartile. So notice that we have 4 groups that have been created. We have the lowest group, the lowest center, the higher center, and then the highest group. So those are 4 equal-sized groups, and the quartiles are dividing into equal groups. There's 3 numbers in each of those groups if we don't count where the quartiles are. The quartiles match up with some of the percentiles. Percentiles are very similar to quartiles, but instead of dividing a data set into 4 equal-sized groups, percentiles divide the data into 100 equal-sized groups, just like percents. So when we say that there's 25% of the data below the first quartile, we're basically talking about the 25th percentile. Bottom 50% of the data, that's the data below the second quartile. That's the same as the 50th percentile. The bottom 75% of data below the third quartile, that's the same thing as the 75th percentile. So again, the 25th percentile is the same thing as Q1. The 50th percentile is the same thing as Q2. And the 75th percentile is the same thing as Q3. Now you might be wondering, where's Q4? We are thinking about quartiles, quarters, 4 equal-sized groups. Well, the quartiles are what divide the 4 different groups. We don't have a 4th quartile, but if we did, it would be at the very end of our data set. And so there's no real point in talking about the 4th quartile. It would almost be equivalent to talking about the 0th quartile. So we only talk about Q1, Q2, Q3, those three numbers divide our data into 4 groups.